What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. You know the other guy on the guy on the other side of that screen. That's Ari Wasserman. If you don't know him, then you must not be an Ohio State fan, because if you're an Ohio State fan, you have an opinion on Ari. Ari, thanks for joining me, man. Thanks for taking some time and coming on the show.
Buddy, I don't know how I got so divisive. I just want to eat chicken wings with my boys and watch football and drink beer like everyone else. But hey, I'm happy to be here. Miss Columbus. I think very highly of this team, and it's unfortunate that I'm getting together with you on a tough circumstance with what's happening with the team, but think very fondly of my time in Columbus and, of course, my past and my career working through the Ohio State beat. So thanks for having me on, and I appreciate it, and I kind of feel like I know more about Ohio State than other teams because of just 10 years of institutional knowledge being around the program. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I was going to actually get there to begin. You were around Ohio State for a long time. You were around for some really damn good teams at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen 10 games of this team. We haven't seen the new look offensive line in a post Seth McLaughlin world, but you've seen the best of them. What do you think of this edition? Probably more post-Oregon than pre-Oregon because they look so different. But you watch this team closely. Like, where, from a national lens and also focusing on Ohio State, like, where do you see this thing? Because I know what I think, and I want to see if we're aligned.
I think coming into the year, my notion was that this Ohio State team was a last of a dying breed in terms of being able to be built the way that they are. When you look at the receivers, that they always have great receivers, but the quarterback, the two-headed monster at running back, the defensive line that brings back 2 or 3 NFL players. I don't need to go through the whole roster with you, but like their depth of talent from top to bottom is national championship caliber. Like coming into the year, my anticipation was that Ohio State would be the best team in college football. Now, they've had some setbacks, obviously, with Josh Simmons going down in the Oregon game. And now, of course, what happened with Seth McLaughlin, who was playing at an All-American level. Like, there have been some times where it's like, what's going on with this team? And maybe part of that is trying to get over the injury of Josh Simmons. And maybe that was most of the Nebraska game was just a dysfunctional offensive line that wasn't meshing.
Yeah.
But I just, for whatever reason, and this isn't a Ryan Day thing, this even goes back because I covered every single game of the Urban Meyer era. The thing that I do not understand about Ohio State, and the thing that drives me nuts, is when you look at the ingredients of what their roster is made up of, it compares very favorably to what you see down south. And now that I've gone into a national role, I've been able to, be around those teams a little bit more. Like Ohio State is the most Alabama, Georgia-ish team in college football anywhere else. But for whatever reason, dating even back to the Urban Meyer era, Ohio State's input is the same, but the output is different. Like they don't get it doesn't seem like they're ever playing at peak Ohio State. The last time I saw Ohio State playing peak Ohio State football even, I think would be the Wisconsin game, the year they won the national championship when they beat the crap out of the Badgers in the Big Ten title game. Why does this team just go Death Star on people and just kick the shit out of everyone? Like there are like, it's like they do, they win their games 38-10 or 38-7. Like I'm not saying they're bad, but when I pictured what Ohio State would be this year, I thought it would just be more dominant week in and week out. And I thought they would beat Oregon. I didn't think I would have to worry about whether or not they were beating Indiana on Saturday. They are a 9 out of 10, and I thought they would be a 10 out of 10. That's my honest assessment.
So I've been on the beat since 2019.
Okay.
The most Death Star that I have seen this team was probably against.
That was a good year to start because that was the second. Yeah.
Maryland 2019, they beat them 73-14, and I was like,
yeah,
do anything they wanted, even though Maryland wasn't good. And then the Michigan State game in 2021, just like, you do not belong on the field with us. We will not allow you to belong on the field with us. Other than that, it's just like they take care of business a lot, but they don't like dominate. Like,
and I want to challenge you here, Spencer, because I'm with you. Like they have games where they drop 70 on teams that are one level above JV. When's the last time they beat the crap out of a really good team?
Yeah,
I guess the Wisconsin thing was wrong because they beat the shit out of Clemson. Sorry for the language. I'm relaxed with you, buddy. I know you. They beat the crap out of Clemson in the playoff. in 2020. So that counts. That has to count for something. But even the 2019 team that you started covering, I think you could actually go back and look and say that was the best Ohio State team of the last 25 years in terms of the sum of its parts. And the best teams that Ohio State has had, I think you could stack up that 2019 team with the 14 team all day long, and they just didn't get it done.
Yeah.
And winning a national championship is really, really hard. Okay. So like you're not a failure if you don't win a national championship. But this year's team has in a sport and in an era where it's hard to have as many good players as Ohio State has. It's disappointing to me that we are in November and it's not like there's doubt of who the best team in college football is. Like I would think that if they were humming with the sum of its parts, that like it would be Ohio State and everybody else. But no, they're got a loss. And granted, teams lose to good teams on the road.
I think
it's not where you thought it would be, right? Are you with me on that? Like,
no, I hear you,
okay.
And I agree. I think we expected 2021 Georgia, and we're getting 2020 Ohio State, where like you think that they're a super team, but you can't really see it or tell because they're just beating teams instead of destroying teams. Like that 2021 Georgia team was insane. And you look at even like we doubted the offense at times, and now like look at the NFL, like some of those offensive guys from Georgia in that 2021 year, it's like, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. So like that's where my head is. It's like I wanted 2021 and I expected 2021 Georgia out of this Ohio State team. And instead I'm getting just like another elite team.
And maybe the actual realistic response is that your expectations and my expectations were so high that it was probably irrational to expect that they would beat them. But you know what bothers me? And I don't know if I'm the only one. Because I think fondly of the people who are there because they've touched my life. But the thing that I cannot stand is when they circulate that picture of CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison and Garrett. You know that picture of them on the sideline with CJ standing up and those four? It's like, you didn't win anything with those guys. And it's like, how do you go to a place where you have that much talent? It like blows my mind that we are going on more than a decade of this team not winning a national championship. Like if you take yourself, what were you, like 11 in 2014? You're young, right? Like that was my 5th year on the Ohio State beat in 2014. And if you would have told me with what Urban Meyer built that year, the team that they had and what they had coming back and the way that they would recruit, you know, in the subsequent years, that we would be in 2024 going on 2025 and Ohio State wouldn't have won another national championship, I would have laughed in your face. And like at a certain point, you know, you're a kick away, you're an injury away, you're always perpetually on the cusp of doing something big. And the reason why Ryan Day gets so much crap, even though I think he's done by and large a really good job as a program builder, is that nobody is an Ohio State fan to be an inch away. Like they want results. And there's a lot of football left. I actually think that if Ohio State's offensive line can survive this disaster and look good against Indiana, that I would pick them to beat Oregon again if they played. I think they could win the national championship again, but there isn't a single team in college football that Ohio State, this version of Ohio State, can't beat.
Yeah.
Like the are they okay, Ohio State? I think could beat everybody. The thing that would be frustrating if I were an Ohio State fan is that if you got every ounce of production from the talent on this roster, they would be the unquestionable favorite to win the national championship this year. And now, I think even in Vegas, they still are. But half the country is questioning whether or not they're even good enough to beat Indiana. And it's like, Indiana's good. They're really good. Even if exceptionally good. They're not supposed to be in this game.
No.
So what are we doing? Like, what's happening? You know, and that to me is the most frustrating thing. So they win 10 games every year. 95% of the fan bases in college football would die to be them. I understand that. But Ohio State standards are really high. And like you can say this, they are in, and I don't mean like maybe this is why people hate me. I don't know if I just like am being an asshole. There are seniors on this football team who have never won a Big Ten championship game and never beat Michigan. Like, when's the last time? I have to go back and look that up, but when's the last time that's happened? It can't be more than 30 years. It has to be more than 30 years ago, right?
It was in the 90s.
It was in the 90s when they were losing to Michigan. Okay. So, like, it's like, how can you be complimentary on one hand? Because I think they're very, very good. But then on the other hand, it's like there's an elephant in the room, which is they haven't won anything in like 5 years or 4 years. And like that is a really long time to have this many good players and not win anything. And granted, it also coincided with the rise of Michigan, and you can feel how you want to feel about how they did that and what they did, but they did.
Yeah.
And beating good teams is hard. So, you know, they didn't just blow it against Michigan. Michigan won the national championship last year. So losing to good teams happens.
Yeah.
5 years is a long time, Spencer. It's a long, long time to not win anything.
So one of the things that I noticed in this summer when people were, 100 days until Ohio State football, 50 days until Ohio State football, the highlights that were being shared to like hype people up were from the Clemson game. And it got me thinking, like, that was 4 years ago. Like there's not that signature moment from the last few years. I don't think Indiana presents a signature moment, but I do think that it represents like you want to dominate and you want to show that you're still a national title contender after the national storyline in this game is now your starting center and potential Remington winner is out for the season. Like, go dominate, because you're not going to get as much credit for beating Indiana anyway, because it's Indiana. No matter how you feel about Indiana, the logo does not give you enough credit if you beat Indiana by 35. But if you do, it can serve as a good launching point for this.
I think if they beat Indiana by 35, people would be like, holy shit.
Yeah, like, okay.
Because Indiana, I know what you're saying. Like, it's not like they beat Alabama. Like, and I get that. And it won't be that way, and that's not Indiana's fault. But if Ohio State does beat the crap out of Indiana and like systematically dominates in a way where you never feel like they're going to lose, I think that would send a message that would at least have people viewing Ohio State differently. Because the thing that's so interesting, Spencer, is that they're still the favorite mathematically in the Vegas odds to do it. Like, they're not a underdog. They are, like, when you look at every like position for position outside of offensive line and quarterback, and he's played well, I think, Will Howard, for outside of the end of the Oregon game, which happens. Like, I think he's done a good job. There isn't a single team that presents a position group that you would take over it. But the thing that's frustrating too is that, like, okay, they've got this awesome defensive line and then they can't sack anyone half the time. And it's like, why? Like, and it's like, what's going on in the Woody that stops them from getting 100% maximum output? That's what Nick Saban's genius was. He had good teams like this every year. He recruited better players, but like Alabama won all those championships because Nick Saban found a way to get his team to play hard and to play focused and hard and good football week in and week out, regardless of the opponent, regardless of what they did last year and regardless of what the expectations were. And Ohio State is so close to having a national title 2 years ago. Like they could have beaten Georgia, if Marv didn't go out and made the field goal or whatever. Like I live that. Like, I know that. But almost doesn't cut it in Columbus. You live there. I live there. That's not enough. So go do it.
Each of the last 2 years have been the closest almost winning a national championship of anybody, maybe in our lifetime. Georgia, you're a field goal away, and you have the soon-to-be 15-0 national champs within 35 yards. And if a guard doesn't trip over his feet,
yeah, right.
And
he gives 30 seconds, 3 milliseconds more for Kyle McCord to make the throw. They beat Michigan and maybe win the national title. I know.
Yeah,
it's and I'm with you. So, but they've been that way for 5 years,
and nobody cares that you're close. At some point, you got to do it.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, okay. So I think that Ohio State is as close right now to that. I'm not saying they're close to what Saban was doing, but they're close to that Nick Saban model of like maximizing your talent on the defensive side, because they have Caleb Downs, who is playing. You don't have to. You can say that he's better at Alabama because of the stats. I'm in the building.
No, he's playing unbelievable football.
I'm in the building every Saturday, and like it is insane what he does. Lathan Ransom.
If there are people out there that are like downing him this year, they need to like get their eyes checked. They might not. They might also think Travis Hunter sucks too, though. I don't know. We'll see.
Lathan Ransom is playing at a level that I didn't know he could reach as a senior, because he's a fifth-year guy, and a lot of times like fifth-year guys they kind of are what they are. He has elevated this year. I know the corners have been not that, but like I think you're getting the maximum out of the healthy Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. You're getting the maximum out of another fifth-year guy in Cody Simon. Like, this defense, I think, is reaching like the maximum, and the patched together offensive line, I think, is close to the maximum because you don't have Josh Simmons, and now you don't have Seth McLaughlin. So if the output is still good, you're probably I think you're getting the maximum out of Will Howard right now. Like we saw what he was at Kansas State. He's like one of the 5 most efficient passers in the country right now. We did not say that about him at Kansas State. And I know, folks in your line of work on the national side did not say that about him at Kansas State. So like they are getting closer to maximizing. But again, I think that's infuriating.
Well, do you think they're going to win the national title?
What's that?
Do you think they're going to win it all this year?
If you get,
I think how concerning is this to you? Because you're in the building every day. How concerning is the Seth McLaughlin injury to you? Because I'll be honest, from where I am, I live in Dallas now. I'm not there every day. They had 2 weeks to try to figure out how to patch together their line after Josh Simmons, and they fielded a team that should have lost possibly to Nebraska because it couldn't block anybody. And so now we're looking at Josh Simmons. We finally got to a point, as analysts, where we accepted that Ohio State had fixed their offensive line issue, right? Their alignment was working, and it was a miracle that they were able to do that. And now you've got to do it again with 2 days before a top 5 team comes in. Like, I think this is like really alarming. I don't know if it's no big deal in your mind or if you think they're going to figure it out, but like, it seems to me like this could derail the season.
I think it is a big deal. Here's the key difference. There's a part of me, and I think I'll be able to get this answer in a post-season world, like not post-season as in like the playoff, but like February and March. There's a part of me that thinks that they were going to move Donovan Jackson to left tackle all along, but didn't do it against Nebraska because they gave him an extra week to prepare for Penn State at left tackle and knew that they were going to beat Nebraska. And then they got into a game and like, oh, crap. Now we've got to go win the game because for 3.5 quarters, they didn't do anything offensively. And then they needed a drive to win the game. And they did completely different things than they had done for 3 quarters and just marched down the field and scored a touchdown and then immediately got 2 stops. So like, there's part of me that thinks that like, that is the outlier of all outliers. And it was harder to replace Josh Simmons. So they took an extra week to do so for the Penn State game. That same part of me thinks that it's not easier to replace Seth McLaughlin because, again, I voted for him as my All-American center when I turned in my FWA ballot. Like, he's been incredible. But you have a 12-game starter at center who now has developed an extra year beyond when he was playing center for you that you can put in at center. They brought Seth McLaughlin in knowing that if he got hurt, they had Carson Hinsman as the backup center. I was more concerned about the Josh Simmons injury than I am right now about the Seth McLaughlin injury. And that could be famous last words. Like, very much could be. I'm fully understanding that putting this on camera could make me look like the stupidest.
Well, can I just be the bad guy and just be honest? Then I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to, because I don't want to be the bad guy. I'm going to throw you under the bus. What's the question I'm going to ask?
I knew this was going to turn into a you interview me situation.
No, but I just want to ask you a question. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being elite and 1 being dog shit, how would you rate Ohio State's offensive line recruiting efforts the last 3 years?
I'll go, because it's a scale of 1 to 10, I will say like a 6. It hasn't been good enough, but they're getting players who are Ohio State caliber, but who are not like
ready to play right now.
Ready to play right away.
Okay. So next question. If you're Ohio State and you have all this NIL money and you were one of the best places in college football to play, is there an excuse for you to recruit any position at less than an 8 out of 10?
No, there's not. But I also think in that exact same frame of mind, there's not a program in the country right now, not in Alabama, not a Georgia, whoever else you deem to be elite, not Michigan, who's won 2 straight Joe Moore awards and who, we're supposed to have this incredible offensive line this year that could withstand a left tackle injury and a center injury and not face a drop off, whether you recruit a 10 out of 10 or not. Because
there's a difference between a drop off and being incredibly incompetent.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Didn't Zen Michalski grade out on Pro Football 17% on that in that game? And I'm not trying to pile on the kid, but there's a drop off. Yes. The next man up thing's a fantasy. If you have somebody who's not as good coming in to play it for the position as somebody who's better than him, of course there's going to be a drop off. but I was alarmed by how bad it was. Like, I think I would say that even going back to my first year on the beat, which was 09, and there were some pretty messed up situations there in 09 with the Tatgate stuff and who people were suspended, that was the single worst performance of any Ohio State position group in the history of my time around Ohio State football. And the thing that bothers me, if I'm an Ohio State fan, is that we know that they probably spent $20 million on their roster, right? Like, they have so many good players. And I'm not saying they need to have a 2 deep that can win the Remington Award, but I thought the lack of recruiting at that position and the lack of preparation going into that game was alarming as hell. And I'm not saying that they can't fix it. They obviously did something to get it going again before this happened. But like on 3 days' notice against a team that's allowing 3 yards per carry or whatever it is, the crazy stat, like that could be tough. And if they get by Indiana because they have Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins and Trey Henderson and all the guys that we know we have on their roster, so then what happens when you play Ole Miss and they've got like 4 first-round draft picks on their defensive line? Like, so there's going to be a point where if it's not this weekend, if they don't figure it out, it's going to cost them a game.
My thought process at this current moment on Wednesday, November 20th, at like 3:30 p.m., 2:30 if you live in Dallas, is that they need to get past Indiana. I don't know if they're, other than just the mental hurdle, I don't know if there's really a path for Michigan to beat them. And then you just play Oregon. And whether you beat Oregon or not, you're going to the college football playoff with this offensive line. From there, you have at least 2 and potentially 3.5 weeks to officially like practice and make sure that this offensive line looks the way you need it to win a national championship. And I don't think that's asking too much as of right now in the current situation that the cards that they've been dealt. Get through Indiana, get through Michigan. Whether you beat Oregon or not, you're going to the playoff anyway. And nobody's going to care if you beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship game if you figure your offensive line out in December and beat them in the semifinal and win the whole damn thing. So, like, that's where my head is at right now. I'm not dismissing a Big Ten championship, but I'm also understanding of, like, here's the current situation. Here's how they have to go. And maybe this is the dumbest conversation ever because it looks pretty seamless and they're fine. I don't think that's going to be the case. But, again, they have a center who, for all of the flaws with what they've done on the offensive line in the last 3 years, leading up to National Signing Days, and then whether you can knock the development or not, has started 12 games for Ohio State in the past and can now play there. Then you have to worry about guard. So I know this is a weird way for us to talk about offensive line, and at the end, I'm just going to say, hey, you think this team's going to beat Indiana? But, like, you know.
I mean, I think they're going to beat them. But let me tell you one thing. If their offensive line looks like it did against Nebraska, they're going to lose.
Yes. Yes.
So, like, if they've got 2 days to figure it out. So, because Indiana, they're good. And It's like, I know if you're an Ohio State fan, you probably have the same mental block that most people do, which is, they're Indiana. They haven't played anybody. They're better than they usually are. But if you don't play anybody, then it's easier. They're good. Like, you watch them. They're good. So they're good enough to beat you if you play like they're better than Nebraska, as we know. And so I think that Ohio State will avoid the sleepwalking that they have sometimes in Ohio Stadium because it is a top 5 matchup and it's the game of the week. And everything you just said, I agree with. Like, if that happens, then like, who cares about the Big Ten championship? You know, all you care about is making the playoff and beating Michigan. I still think it's going to be a bigger deal than they're fine. Like, I think they're going to have to figure some things out. And it's also a nice reminder, too, of you need to have more than 7 offensive linemen who can play on your team at a given point. And I don't know, and I talked about this with Andy on our show today, but, like, we get so caught up in the portal and, the portal. It's like the teams that are the best are still the teams, in my opinion, that can recruit really good high school players. And now in the portal era, you don't get the benefit of having 2 or 3 years. You don't get, like, the Zen Mikulski career arc isn't going to exist for much longer.
No.
Unless it's an Ohio kid who just wants to play for Ohio State and nothing else matters to him. So the players that you do bring in, you have a year, 2 at most, to get them onto the field. but they have to be good enough to play earlier because you're relying on these players now. When I was on the beat, your third string offensive tackle was the 5-star kid that you brought in 2 months earlier. Now your backup offensive tackle might not even be able to play the game. And that is a huge difference. So if you have a 5-star offensive tackle, the kid needs to play. I think that this is like a lesson of get people into the game more, keep them on your roster, have them seasoned, because with 2 weeks to prepare, there is no reason why Ohio State should have put what they put on the field on offensive line that day. I don't think that. I think that was coaching. That was a bad coaching job.
Well, and I think the same thing applied when Georgia was trotting out the backup for who was it, Tate Ratledge, and the offensive line just looked bad.
And it happened to Alabama too, because Alabama lost didn't they lose Caden Proctor last year and they almost lost to USF? I'm not saying that Ohio State's negligent and that this doesn't happen anywhere else. I'm just saying that when it comes to having a team that is this valuable and this important, they won the offseason and they made us all forget about what happened the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We're in the season now. Ohio State fans expect to win on Saturday, and they expect to win. I don't know if it's national championship or bust, but they have to get to the semifinal at least this year, or it was an abject failure in my mind. And you're not going to be able to say, well, we lost some players, because Notre Dame has too, and everybody else has. People lose players all the time, and so it's I feel like my negativity irks people, and I'm not trying to be negative. I think that where people misunderstand me is that I am holding all of my talking points are burnt into my brain with Ohio State from Urban Meyer and the expectations that were a part of that program. And I don't know that I'm saying anything that if Ryan Day were sitting next to me would be this guy's out of his mind. Ryan Day wants to win the game really bad. He knows how important it is to win the game. And he knows that the output that Ohio State has had isn't good enough. So me saying it might be offensive to you, but the people who actually are in the building agree with me. And if they didn't, then you would hate them. So I'm my expectations of this program and what I think that they should achieve coincide with the expectations from the architects of the people who put it together. And I think that that's a form of love, if you want to look at it that way. I don't think that, people think that some people, you either think I'm an Ohio State homer or you think that I hate Ohio State. And why don't we just say I respect them and their program and what they stand for and the people who root for it. And I want people to be happy. That's all.
I think you said similar things about, and we won't get into this, but I do think you said similar things about Georgia when they almost lost to Kentucky, and Alabama when they're losing to Vanderbilt. There's 3 programs that you just hold to a higher level because you come to expect it from those logos. And so I think there's a level.
And the investment, Spencer, the investment.
Yes. Yeah.
The amount of money that goes into this, it's not a hobby. It's not, the brotherhood and all the stuff that you see on the Woody. It's all nice and warm and fun. This is a freaking business. And they're spending a lot of money on their coach. They're spending a hell of a lot of money on their rosters. A lot of the money that's coming in is at the expense of the people who fill that stadium every day. And people want results. And I think that it's fair. When you cover Ohio State and you're negative, it looks like you're an asshole because there's so many positive things happening in Columbus all the time. They win so many games. They have so many draft picks. They recruit so well. There's a lot of wins that happen in Columbus. But it's okay to be critical when it's deserved. And I've always been praised. I praise them when they deserve to be praised. And I criticize them when they deserve to be criticized. It's just I don't think people like being criticized. So, and that's okay. It doesn't bother me. I just think that the standard to which I hold Ohio State is very high. And Ryan Day would be the first to admit that they haven't reached their standard, because there's no way that you could ever say with a straight face that not beating Michigan or winning the Big Ten for 4 years is okay.
So step 1 of that is this week getting into sole possession of active coaches with top 5 wins. If he wins this game, he will.
That'd be a nice way to juice the stats, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Indiana is a top 5 team right now, so you get to count it. Michigan State at the time, I think, was a top 10 team. Ryan Day still counts that. I don't think he cares, but you count that as a top 10 win. That's step 1. Then step 2 is beating Michigan next week. I assume that you think both of those things will happen. Ohio State will beat Indiana and Ohio State will beat Michigan. Is that safe to assume, or are you on watch here?
I think Ohio State will beat both of them. I am on watch, though, at the same time. Is that okay? Can I say it that way?
Well, yeah, especially because Indiana.
I was going to write this column. I've had this column on, like, I have a outline on my computer of ideas that I have that I want to write. And I'm going to tell you this because I wanted to write it. And I don't think I can write it anymore because it's absurd now. But how old are you, Spencer? What year were you born?
I was born in 1996.
Okay. It's a perfect year because they blew it that year, didn't they? The 90s were a really dark time. You were an infant when this was happening. And I was a kid too, so I'm not going to act like I was there and know. But I've gone back and during my time on the beat have researched and learned a lot about that era. And Ohio State got into games with Michigan in the 90s where they were the much better team, right? If you go back and you look at some of the teams and what was on those teams that lost to Michigan under John Cooper, it's confusing as hell, right? Like they had more NFL players. I mean, Ohio State was always built bigger, stronger, faster than Michigan. But there was a mental aspect to this with John Cooper that wasn't just, well, look at Ohio State's offensive line, defensive line, receivers, they're better. And I'm starting to wonder if there is a mental thing happening very similarly to what happened in the 90s with the coaching staff, where they treat the game differently in a bad way, or they lock up during the week, or there's tension in the building. Because I think players can feed off that energy.
Yeah.
Because Ohio State could have won last year. They played a team that won the national championship. I think that that's fine. But the previous 2 years, what happened in those games, Ohio State shouldn't have lost those games.
I say both 21 and 23. We're just like, okay, 21, Michigan snaps the streak, like looks a little bit team of destiny wise in the Big Ten. 23, like they're just damn good. And it was maybe potentially.
But 22 happened.
22, I blame on so many things, including we'll see NOAs at some point. But I also blame very largely on and I don't blame the fans for this, but I blame a tension from 9 a.m. when I walked in the building until 4 p.m. when everybody left. The tension in that building was untenable. You can't win games with the tension that was built up. Because
people are freaked out. And that's kind of the point that I'm going to make, though, is that I wanted to write a column that, regardless of what the rosters look like and how bad you might think Ohio State has the talent advantage, that there is a aspect of this where that tension is palpable and impacts the way that your team plays. And if Michigan were an 8-win team that got a pretty good defense and a competent-ish offense, I would have written it. But I think Michigan is too bad to write that now. Like there's no way that they're not going to win that game, right? Like they cannot lose that game.
I don't think Michigan, and I actually might see if you want to come back next week because we'll talk a lot of Michigan, but I don't think Michigan can move the ball on them enough. Even if Ohio State struggles on offense, like I still think that Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson, and Quinshon Judkins exist. And I don't, and again, I'm for the third time on this show, famous last words, but I don't think Michigan has anything offensively. And I do believe to an extent.
And that's what's maddening about it, because you can break it down with the X's and O's all day, but if they come into the game and shit their pants, then it doesn't matter. Like Michigan gets an early turnover and they go up 7-0, then all of a sudden it's here we go again, and then it just becomes this mental thing, and your offensive line isn't playing really well, and Kenneth Grant is in the backfield the entire. Like you can draw up ways where Ohio State's losing 13-10 in the third quarter, and then the entire building is frozen. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the entire world if Michigan played the best game ever. They've been saving up stuff all year. Their season's lost. Like this has already happened multiple times in Ohio State history. So I'm with you that I think they're going to win both games. There's no reason why I don't think that Ohio State should lose to Michigan outside of just not being there emotionally. And if that happens, and I will tell you this right now, I think Ryan Day is a great coach. I give him a 90%. If they lose that game, they have a coaching problem. Like they might need to address, because that is something that is tangible. And if you can't win that game with what they have up there and what Ohio State has down south, then you have an issue that is deeper than, well, we'll get them next year. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that is so. And I know that Ryan Day is probably up at night worried about beating Michigan. And if they coach the right way and play that game, they should win. there is a path to grab ass, as Bill Landis likes to affectionately say. So not to torpedo what you were going to say, but like
no, you're fine.
That was the long answer of saying I do think they'll win both games. I would not bet my life on it. I wouldn't bet anything I had on it.
So I'm going to tell you a quick little story that I'll go ahead and tell you. 2 years ago, 2022, walking into the Woody for the weekly press conference with Ryan Day, John Cooper is around. He does a lot of media still. He's the nicest guy in the world. He walks by. I'm in the lobby waiting to go in to talk to, obviously, Ryan Day about an hour before the press conference. And John Cooper, in his old Southern charm, looks at Jeremy Birmingham and I and says, "Another week at the office, huh, boys?" And I looked at Birmingham and I said, that's a little too big of a joke for John Cooper to make. And then an hour later, we talked to Ryan Day, and it was like the most tense press conference you'll ever be in. Yeah. And I was like, there's got to be a happy medium here for late November activity. And I hope that Ohio State will strike that happy medium next week. But I also think that, like, I actually think this week being a top 5 game against Indiana and Indiana forcing Ohio State's hand to have the full attention on Indiana helps them in a way that they haven't been able to be helped the last 3 years. Because in 21, they played a Michigan State team that they knew they were going to have a laser show against and just destroy them. 22, they had to go to Maryland, which wasn't a good team, but they were looking so far ahead of Michigan. And then last year they played not a good opponent. I don't even remember who it was, but it wasn't anything on my radar noteworthy that made me think like, okay, like they have the attention of this team and not Michigan. I think this being against Indiana as a top 5 team helps them for next week against Michigan because they can't look ahead to Michigan and begin building that tension already. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the thing that I think is alarming is that the tension in the press conference exists for a reason. You know whose press conferences never had that tension? Urban Meyer. You know whose press conferences never had that tension? Jim Tressel. You want to know why? Because they owned Michigan.
Yeah.
So, and I guess you cut the tension by beating them, and I think that they will this year, and hopefully that'll help them get the emotional edge back. But if you ask me what scares, if you're an Ohio State fan, what should scare you about Michigan, that should scare you. Like, I don't know, you can break down the rosters and their offense sucks and their quarterback stinks. They can't throw the ball. That right there is more powerful than I think people think. So we'll see, how it goes. But yeah, big game this weekend. I cannot wait to watch that big noon, baby. 11 a.m. here. It's going to be fun and, good for Indiana for making this fun. I think that they deserve their flowers. I don't know if you saw it, Spencer, but I wrote a pretty long and strongly worded column about how they're being mistreated nationally this morning on 3. And, the logo on the helmet, signifies a lot of losing in the past, but that doesn't signify who's under the helmets this year. And they've got a lot of really good players. So they should lose. Ohio State should beat them, but you got some really interesting matchups coming up, and I can't wait to watch them.
Very last thing, one word. You don't have to give me any explanation. Who's winning it all?
You know who I really like? I'm sorry. You know who I really like? I want to say Ohio State, but I'm on an Ohio State podcast, and I just got done telling you all the reasons why things could go wrong. You know who I really like? And it's like a tasty, because you like to wager a little bit too, don't you? Over there in Ohio, you sprinkle a little, because Daddy over here is a big gambler. Ole Miss to win the national title at 11-1 is a very tasty number to me at this point. And I don't know if it's just because I've had exposure to them. I was at the Georgia game 2 weeks ago. They have a really, really, really good defensive line. Their offensive line is good. Their running back is really good. Trey Harris wasn't even playing. Jackson Dart's playing well. They have the pieces to beat anybody this year. And I really, really like them. Now, Lane Kiffin's only beaten Georgia at one time. I get the reasons why. But at 11-1 in November, I might throw a few shekels on that because, I think the best 2 teams in the country are Ohio State and Oregon. And that opinion was formed yesterday morning before Seth McLaughlin got injured. And now I want to see what it looks like without him before I pick them again.
Listen, I was only around you for a year or two on the beat. You liking Lane Kiffin is one of the most predictable things I think I could have come up with on this show.
Who said I liked him? I just said his team is really good this year. I think he's a very funny person. I think that what he said yesterday about not wanting to play in the SEC and championship and coaches, I thought that was alarming. And I appreciate candid discussion because you have sat through a lot of press conferences in your day of coach speak, and there's not a lot of insight. Like the thing I appreciate about Lane Kiffin is that he's just honest and will tell you what he's thinking. So, I like to have a good time. I like to have fun. I like to throw a few bets out there, like 25 a Saturday. But like it is, it's going to be a fun Saturday. I can't wait. I'm excited to see Ohio State, what it looks like. I'm also excited to see if Ole Miss can prove me right, because I don't know, you like looked at me like, oh my god, Ole Miss. But like go watch them. They're really good. If they're playing well, they're really good.
I like it. I mean, I think they're really good. I don't trust Lane in January, but I also
they just beat the crap out of Georgia, bro.
I could be proven wrong.
And it's not that they won by 20 or whatever. It was that they systematically beat the shit out of them, like physically, like up front. They were open the entire, like they have, and one thing you can't say about Lane is the man knows how to draw up an offense. So, in that realm, scoring a lot of points with Trey Harris not even playing in that game, like there is a lot to like there. So, just high alert. If you're in Ohio and you're listening to this and you want to throw $100 on it, 11-1 is a tasty number. And I guarantee you'll be able to hedge out of it eventually, because I don't think they're going to lose their first round game, no matter who they're playing, unless it's like Georgia again or something.
Folks, I told Ari I needed him for 15 to 20 minutes. We have gone 40, and I don't think I have stopped renewing my thoughts, becoming more informed, and also smiling since we started this. It's always a good time. I really appreciate you, Ari, for coming on the show and for talking ball. I will try to have you on at some point. I hope to see you potentially out in the Rose Bowl if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, somewhere along the road.
I actually think I am going to the Rose Bowl, but I need to go look up. I think I'm going to the Fiesta Bowl and the Rose Bowl in back-to-back days this year.
Okay.
Because my parents live in Phoenix, and the drive is very easy out to LA. But I don't know how it works. Is the bowl seating now just based on your seed, or there's no more conference tie-ins, right?
The Big Ten automatically goes to the Rose Bowl. The Big 12 automatically goes to the Fiesta Bowl. The ACC goes to the Peach Bowl, and the SEC goes to the Sugar Bowl. Yes.
So the Big Ten champion plays in the Rose Bowl? Is that how they're going to figure it out?
Correct.
Okay. So if they lose and they're the 5 seed, they might be playing in Boise on Friday night, right?
They might be playing in the Fiesta Bowl against like a Boise or a BYU or a Colorado, because they'll probably win the 5-12 matchup.
I know we've gone 43 minutes, but if Ohio State plays Oregon in the Big Ten championship game and they feel certain that if they're 10-2, they would be the 5 seed, I would tank the game. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of getting matched up with Alabama in the second round if you can go be a 17-point favorite in back-to-back games before going to the semis? Like that, they're going to have to fix this. The problem with that is that you can't guarantee that if you lost to Oregon, you'd only fall to 5. But if I were Oregon, I would tank it. Would Oregon rather win the Big Ten, or would they rather play BYU and Boise again, or Colorado? I mean,
it's
more important.
It's a choice of fewer. It's one fewer game or 2 easier opponents.
Yeah, but the one fewer game comes into a game where if you lose, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's like going to be either like Penn State, Alabama, or Notre Dame. So like you're playing a really good team regardless, as opposed to like your path being Boise then Colorado, or BYU then Boise.
And that's hard. Like, I mean, Boise, but like I think like either Ohio State or Oregon would kill Boise. So
wait, Oregon would kill Boise?
I do, yeah.
Okay, I thought we saw that game. I could have swore.
We did.
Okay.
Don't you think the spread would be like 18 points or 17 points if they played tomorrow?
It would. So the Action Network,
I do not care what happened in September.
So the Action Network puts out its bowl projections every week, and they put the spreads with them. It's
okay.
Awesome.
So what is it?
The Ohio State Boise spread, I believe, is 20.5, and then in a second
So you don't think that Oregon would be laying 18, 20?
Yeah, and then the Fiesta Bowl would be Ohio State like 16.5 against Colorado. Lay them.
Or would you rather go catch 2 against Georgia in the first round? I don't know. Pick one. I don't know. Yeah, they're going to have to figure that out. But yeah, no, Ohio State's a really good team. Super excited to watch them, and I appreciate you having me on. And I hope that Ohio State fans don't hate me because I'm not trying to be like this. I just want to be fun and be happy with my friends, you know?
He's Ari Wasserman, Andy and Ari on 3. Check it out every day. They do great work. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. And this has been a Lettermen Row show. Thanks for joining me, Ari, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yep, no problem.